What is going on, walk-ins? Welcome, family. We're glad to be back for another Wednesday drop of another episode. As always, we're here to help you get more patients, deliver better care, get repeat visits, and scale your clinics. Michael, I can safely say that if you're listening today, you're going to learn all about what scale looks like in urgent care clinics. What's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up? Yes, scale, leadership, real world, what's going on in terms of like moving pieces, adding locations, all the fun stuff. So what are we talking about today? So we have on today from Carbon Health, we have Joni Lutman and Deniz Garrett. So Joni, she's been the regional medical director and director of clinical quality at Carbon Health. And then Deniz, he's the area manager in the Northwest area. And he's more on the business side and the financial side. And like he's the business arm of the Carbon Health in that area. And the cool part is, for those who don't know who Carbon Health is, they have well over 100 locations. They're always growing and adding and spreading their areas on a regular basis. So it's really cool for us to have them come on because we get to hear from them like what it means to kind of have moving around like tons of locations and what systems work and what systems don't work, things like that. But Joni and Deniz, thank you for coming on today.
Welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you. Say hello to the audience and tell us one thing about you that nobody else knows. And we'll let the ladies go first. Joni, step up.
Yeah. Okay, on the spot. So I'm not sure if anybody does know this. I've been in healthcare for a really long time. So people think that I've always wanted to be in healthcare. And that is really not true. Like my dream was to be a sports broadcaster.
I can hear that too. You'd be awesome at that.
Yeah, I can see that.
I love sports, but my mother was a nurse and said, why don't you go into nursing? And I did. And I quickly went back and got my NP. So absolutely love it. But people always assume that, that's what you always wanted to do with your life. And mine is not the case. I secretly would love to be on the sidelines reporting football games.
Oh, and I have to encourage everybody, if you're listening on the podcast, like through Anchor or something like that, or podcasts, Apple Podcasts, go over to the YouTube channel. We're recording this. She's got the look to be able to be a broadcaster. Like the cheekbones are there. Everything just adds up for you to be a sportscaster. I love it so much. That's such a cool.
Who's your favorite team?
Denver Broncos.
Okay. So Ohio State is my favorite college team.
Oh, okay.
Buckeyes.
And Georgia Bulldogs, because my daughter went there. So
okay. Nice.
It's a split household. But
you're in Denver.
Team is
crazy.
Steelers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. You're not meeting any stereotypes at all right now.
That's kind of fantastic.
All right, Deniz, your turn, man. One thing about you nobody else knows.
How's it going, fam? Thanks so much for helping me on board. My name is Deniz Garrett. I am the area manager for Carbon Health for the Northwest area. Something I guess unique for me. I've always wanted to grow up to be a pilot, and I had the worst vision possible, but I actually ended up joining a military aviation unit, and I got a chance to fly the OH-58 Kiowa in Thailand for a little bit. And so just a dream come true for me, but it wasn't meant to be. I ended up becoming a signal officer and doing the communications piece of it. But still just having that joystick, being able to maneuver the helicopter, especially in the landscape of Thailand was, that's definitely a bucket list. So wonderful that
you and I can swap some stories.
I'm about to say, I think you just opened the squirrel already in the pilot work. So Nick is a pilot as well.
Okay.
Guilty.
Yeah. But
my wife is a helicopter pilot. So
that's
that's cool. Yeah.
That's outstanding. Well, y'all are doing much harder things because you actually have to use everything that's going on. I can keep 2 fingers on the yoke and just do my thing, but
it's so much going on.
I love it. Here's what I love about this. Y'all seem like 2 very different people with 2 very different backgrounds. And then you've come together and Deniz was saying even before you hopped on, Joni, that you guys are like 2 peas in a pod. Y'all are out.
You're ride or die.
Ride or die. Love working together. So all about this dyad. Why don't you lay that up, Michael, and let's get into it.
Well, and to be completely transparent, like when he said dyad stuff, when he sent over the information, I was like, I've seen this, but I've never hear people talk about it very much. But it reminded me of like a DSO situation in the dentist world. So where you're just allowing administrative side to work with the healthcare side and kind of like can help the business side of an urgent care. Cause I think doctors quickly forget that they're running a business too. They're not just helping patients.
Right.
And we find it all the time that when the doctor takes time to focus on the business side, the urgent care naturally begins to grow a little bit. And nothing against working on, helping patients, but at the end of the day, you have a business, you have money coming in and money going out. and you always want more coming in than going out. And the dyad side helps control that. But yeah, you guys hop in and explain what dyad is, how y'all are using it, the ups and downs of it, everything like that.
Yeah. Joni, you want to?
Yeah, I'll tee it up and then Deniz will take over there.
Sure.
So it's a structure that they have throughout the organization. So from the top down, since we've restructured, we have area dyad leaders, and then we also have local dyad leadership structure. So Deniz and I are at the area level. Deniz manages like the clinical operations piece, the facilities piece, and he manages like the support staff, the MAs, XRTs, everything to do with like operations, supply costs, all of that. The P&L, he's a P&L pro. He will find anything wrong or right with a P&L. So he's your expert. And then I am more on the clinical side. So I manage specifically just the clinicians. I manage their quality of care, practice, what are levers that we can utilize for them to increase profitability for the centers. And that centers around like metrics like coding and documentation, chart closures within 48 hours, their NPS, like how, and Google reviews, are they getting great reviews? How can we help that? Because that's all going to help bring patients back to the centers. And then we added a metric of follow-ups. We have some PC in some of our clinics, primary care, not in all of our clinics. And what we're seeing in urgent care, I'm sure everybody is we're getting more of those patients that cannot get into primary care providers.
For sure.
So it's our responsibility to help them, to be that bridge between UC and PC and get them in to be seen. So we do see them. And that requires some follow-up, whether we follow up with them 1 or 2 times. That's bringing revenue back to the clinics. And it's also helping our community. So Deniz, I'll tee it off to you to talk a little bit.
And thanks so much, Joni. And understanding the levers that we have to pull are super important. Understanding the financials are super important, but also teaching them to the clinic managers, and they understand, what does EBITDA mean? What are the things I have to do in the clinic to be able to pull the right levers to get to the goals that I need to have. How does ADV, how does GRPV, the gross revenue per visit, affect my monthly output? We have a lot of folks that have really high clinical acumen, but not so great operational acumen from that standpoint, because they just never have really been taught. And so my job is really to help really provide awareness, coaching, understanding. And really with Joni, understanding the process so that we tailor all of the operations, all the metrics, according to that workflow. And then do we produce the right output or not? And really that's the summation of really all of it. and really making sure that our clinic managers understand, the financials, they understand what their goals are, their targets, and they understand from a workflow standpoint, what needs to be done in order to achieve that in a sustainable way. And, the culture of each of our clinics, it really stems from the leadership. And the leadership is that local dyad partnership that Joni was referring to. And if there isn't a tight, cohesive, unifying relationship, there's just a direct correlation with clinics that are profitable, that have that, and ones that don't. And so we really strive to make sure that the culture, the soil, we always talk about the soil, making sure that, our folks are in good soil, and what creates good soil, having great leaders, having great, operations, having great metrics, having great reports that we can see that are accurate, so that we know how to navigate that. In the military, we always say intel drives maneuver, what dictates how you go. And so, when we look at our financials, we look at our reportings, I will put holes in these reports to see if it holds water, just to make sure that they're accurate, they're trustworthy, and that we can move in the right direction with them. And all that really culminates into folks having a much better, clearer understanding of their job, of their position, and what their expectations are. They are, these clinic managers and the clinic medical directors, they are the CEOs, if you will, of their clinics. And we really take our time to hire great folks that we can provide autonomy and enough rope for them to be able to just lead and give them the resources to run an effective clinic. And that's, we've had a lot of turnover, as a result of that to get to that point. And sometimes you shake the trees a little bit, right? You lose a few leaves, but the tree continues to grow. And in our region,
I'm loving all these like comparisons.
He's
the king of that too. He loves.
And we can talk more about this too. But just from an effectiveness standpoint, and I'll give you an example. Back in July, last July to the end of the year, we had over 100 closures in our clinics.
Ooh.
And that translated into over $500,000 in lost revenue. Who wouldn't like $500,000 in revenue? And when you really just look at the granular part of that, it's from a leadership standpoint, it's a recruiting effort, not having the right folks, loyalty issues, all that kind of the culture just wasn't on kilter. And so Joni and I really campaigned together and strive to get this right sized. And year to date, we've only had 23 closures for the entire year for our entire region. It's a 76% improvement. But, those are all things that a great dyad partnership can do. It can create the culture that has an effective result that really contributes to your bottom line.
Yeah, and it's about one of our mottos, right, is hiring people who genuinely care. So we do try to hire people that really, really care. And that can get along with that dyad. So we're a dyad structure at the regional level, but we also have a dyad structure at the clinic level. And it's a 1-to-1. So we have one clinic manager to one clinic medical director at every clinic. And it's split the same way. The manager handles the ops piece, supply ordering, and ancillary staff. And then the clinician, medical director, handles the provider metrics, making sure that they're taking care of patients well, that we're meeting our metrics, follow-up rates, and doing really well on that end of things. So I think it's really good. And to Dennis's point, we shifted and did it locally because it wasn't working at a larger scope, right? It was too much of a lift when you're managing several clinics that you really can't laser focus on the staff that you have in one clinic. And what those clinics need. So it's really helped us get to kind of like mediocre, middle of the road to kind of exceptional in a lot of these clinics.
Okay, so
there's so many questions.
I've almost got a choose your own adventure here that we could go down.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to throw out a couple of things. Michael, throw out a couple of things, and then let's figure out which rabbit hole we want to go down. Joni, you said right out of the gate, you were talking about follow-up. We did an episode way back called The Patient Care Power Move, and it's all about there's fortune in the follow-up. Like always book a meeting from a meeting. Always book a meeting from a meeting. Book an appointment. Gosh, there's so much value here. I'm trying to figure out where all we can go. We could talk about EBITDA. I love that. That's awesome. And how you manage that at the clinical level. We can talk about there's how your intel drives your maneuvers. We talked a little bit about your net promoter score. Are you tracking your net promoter score, your door-to-door time? I think you said patient value, cost per patient or value per patient. How did you write that down?
Yeah,
GRPV.
GRPV.
Right? Everybody calls this something different, but
right.
I'll try and get it the way. So GRPV. I happen to resonate the most. We literally, our last episode was about my failure, and the fact that you just talked about 100 closures. I don't know. Where do y'all want to go from here? This is like I've got so many things I could go.
And then I was just leaning into. So one of the things that we find a lot of our listeners do is that they hook onto something practical and try to implement.
Right.
So if there were some things that you guys, obviously you've learned tons of the items, but there was if you were going to make a change right now for a clinic, or you're like the number one key indicator you were going to look at, if somebody said, hey, come look at my 10 clinics and tell me what's wrong, where do you go first?
That's a good question.
What's the quickest and fastest fix to kind of get the ball moving in the right direction? Or what was the when you started going through all these clinics, you had the aha moment. It's like, why didn't we think about that in the first place? That could have solved so many problems up front.
For me, from an analytics standpoint, I would want somebody from the outside to look at our reporting structure and see, are we measuring the right things? Are we looking at the right things? We have a metric called the door-to-door time. and it's measuring from when a patient walks in to when they check out. And then all the different, the processes that happen in between then. But I would want them to look at the reporting and to see if it's accurate, if it's showcasing, what we need. Are we pulling the right data? Are we missing anything? And that way, then we're not going in half cocked to, making directional changes because we've got good, solid information.
And I think that's good for me is the people. So if I would go in, if I'm going to make a change, the first thing I did when I came in to Carbon, I was a part of one of our largest acquisitions over 4 years ago. And it was a look at everybody in those clinics, doing like an analysis, like are they a good fit culturally? Are they a good fit clinically? Are they able to move the mark? Are they knowledgeable? Are their skills and procedures up to par? How can we help them? And we had a lot of turnover because we are looking for a specific type of person within Carbon that actually wants to be there, wants to care for patients, wants to make improvements. So I would say looking at your roster first, looking at your roster and seeing your A players, your B players and your C players that actually need to be managed out. That can make an enormous difference in the, success or failure of the clinic. So that's one, people. And second is like education and knowledge level. We've recently implemented some fellowships, urgent care fellowship programs, because a lot of new grads are getting out of school. They went to school during COVID. They didn't have a lot of experience. And a lot of these urgent cares are single provider coverage, right? So it's only one provider. And if you are not knowledgeable and well-versed in the skill set, it's not going to be a good experience for the patient or the provider. So we want to make sure that they have the tools that they need to succeed. So we do have a 6-month fellowship program, which I think is really, really unique. And we have the AI charting, which is also something that we're trying to, it really allows providers to spend more time. Our average door-to-door time, I think, Dennis, when we started tracking this was like well over
200 minutes.
200 minutes. And now it's like clinics are
under 50 minutes right now.
Yeah. With most of them being under 50 minutes, which is what the goal is. And that was like improving who's there. It's improving how their onboarding was, and kind of offboarding people that really just did not fit with the culture and the skill set and what we were looking for in an urgent care setting.
We tell our teams too, in the roster for a AAA team looks a whole lot different than the roster in a major leagues team. So if you really want to get to the major leagues, you got to make sure you have the right roster. And if you've got folks that you're just suffering from the halo effect, or the pick of the litter syndrome, you really have to take a hard look at, choose your hard. It's hard to, continue to suffer through toxic work environments, but it's also hard to make a change and find great leaders and get those folks on board. So you choose your hard. And we really have tried to make that as the emphasis in the culture and how we try to lead our teams, because there's no way you can achieve those workflows or those results without those folks being on board. You just spin your wheels. And we kind of realized that, from last September, for a couple of months, and just did a really hard evaluation on that. And Joni and I really looked and had to have some really difficult discussions with some folks about expectations and what kind of decisions they wanted to make. And, and if they left, it would be very difficult for us to fill the slots and schedule and, just trying to make sure that we've got clinics open. But we chose that as our hard, because continuing the path that we were at, it wasn't attainable to the goals that we needed to make.
Well, yeah, you remind me of, when potential urgent care comes to us that we could probably work with, they usually give us like Google Ads access or something so we can take a look at it. And you probably know where I'm going with this one. And talking about people making the hard decision to get rid of certain people. So we had a situation where they're having us look at the ads account and we're like, hey, there's a lot of things here that we could fix. But the person that was running the ads was on the call too. And it was a family friend type of thing. Like she was part of the family. And so she hopped off at some point and we turned to the owner and said, all right, look, we got to tell you right now, she's costing you a ton of money and we can fix this. And she hopped right back on, so we couldn't continue the conversation. Later, the AI note centered the conversation anyway, so she saw it, but it was okay. But
we love AI too.
Yeah, we love AI, even when it does things we don't want it to do. Yeah. But all that being said, we quickly recognized, like, if you just simply got rid of this person, you would be much more profitable, just from the standpoint, like, they're spinning the wrong wheels the whole time.
You could see the look in that guy's eyes too, man. He was just destroyed.
Yeah, he was. And then we have situations where the front desk person is destroying the amount of patients coming in the door, like just absolute disasters on phone calls and things like that. Like it's real.
Yes.
Oh, it is. And you got to learn from each other. Like, so speaking of that, right, if there's something not going right, or Dennis and I both are pretty opinionated people. And so I think that works for us. I'm not really offended if he says, Joni, you need to change this. You need to do this. You need to get rid of this person. We need to kind of like pivot and do something. And the same when I approach him. So I think that you have to have really an open mind and open communication. And we try to teach that too with our dyad leaders, because I don't think that, they would be successful if not. And difficult conversations are one of the hardest things to teach, right? Yes. But to see them succeed at it and to be comfortable in it and to say, hey, this isn't personal. We're all trying to be better here. And that goes without saying, like Dennis and I admit our wrongs, right? Hey, I messed up there. Right? I can do better. And when your teams see that, they're like, okay,
it's okay to be vulnerable. Yeah.
It's okay to be vulnerable. And they do care about us. And I think that that's probably the second thing is hiring people who care and walking the walk, right? I've been a nurse practitioner for 28 years. I still practice in the clinic a day a week. I want to see what my teams are doing. I want to see what their struggles are. Dennis is in clinic every week, meeting with his team members, going over stuff. So we're not like out of touch leaders. We're in it. We're in it with them.
No armchair quarterbacking.
Yeah. So I think that also makes you really successful as a unit when they see us kind of like diving in, picking up the slack, helping, advocating for them when they bring up, because that's the biggest thing I've heard. They don't care about us. They just want us to see patients.
Right.
And we have our staff know we care.
That's right.
They know we care because we really do go to bat for them. We never have anybody stay late. I know some urgent cares, they're over. We have specific like scheduling, velocity scheduling that manages the schedule and walk-ins. And we have a staffing model. So if you get to X number of patients per day, when it's consistent, we add staff to help support the teams so that they're able to kind of absorb that volume and that load and not be overwhelmed. Because
it's a very objective response to an emotional situation, and again, I think if you don't provide that framework in your environment, you just continue to spin. It's like a hurricane. And so, after a certain ADV target, we're able to add a half a head or a full head, and showcase the volume and still meet our payroll goals. So we're not giving the farm away on payroll goals, and we're efficient on our operations. But all that, everyone kind of knows what those numbers and those targets are. So it kind of just helps with the conversations that you don't really end up having to have because you've already got the framework in place and the understanding, and it makes sense logically, to the team. So, and going back to what Joni was mentioning about, just that culture and that relationship, and speaking honestly and truthfully into each other, that only happens if you have a solid relationship. That only happens when you have the ability to speak that truth into each other, and showcase that. If that's not there, I think things would become very offensive. It would not be taken in the right context or tone or whatever have you. And so that relationship is foundational in everything that we do as leaders. We are in the people business first, and everything comes, after that. So relationships are the most important part of this foundation.
When I think you mentioned, the ability, how a leader should be apologizing, admitting wrong, and being a real person. We're finishing up the book on unreasonable hospitality. I don't know if y'all. Yeah,
so good.
Such a good book.
It's so good. I highly recommend it.
We do team reads as a company. Like every quarter, we have a new book as a team we read.
We don't have 100 locations plus.
Yeah.
Thousands of employees.
Yeah,
just to be clear.
One location, but that book, even though it's about the restaurant business, it's really about how to deal with people and build the relationship side and the chapter we just finished, it talked about leaders need to be able to apologize and admit when they're wrong. And it creates deposits into that relationship where they can now be vulnerable on both sides.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it does trickle down to the clinical teams and to patients.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We have to admit our wrongs to patients too. We have to apologize. And I think that goes a long way. If you have those open conversations with patients, instead of taking a defensive stance, it changes the whole
everything
conversation, right? And relationship. I've had patients that have come in angry and not in a good place. And I don't have a defensive stance. And when they leave, they're like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's fine. We all have bad days. So
that's real. Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to go back. I'm hitting the rewind button a little bit.
Sorry.
And at this point, I honestly don't care if we go a little long because I'm having a good time. You guys are awesome. So you've closed more clinics than most people have ever even stepped into. You have taken that and I believe you said this year, and if these are numbers that we don't need to share, let me know. But I believe how about I say it this way? You've reduced your closings by 76%, I believe is what you said.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the common denominator that I'm hearing from you is the dyad leadership coupled with your people and your processes. So the leadership, right people, right processes. Help me connect those dots. Where did you identified where things were going wrong? You put this dyad into a triad, I guess how you look at it, but you put these three pieces together. How did you implement that at scale?
I think the first thing we did, Joni and I did, was kind of look at our schedule and see where all of our gaps were, initially, and then really drilling down into what was causing those gaps. And in some situations, it was just terrible, management of the schedule. And in some cases, it was just really a geography issue where the location was a very hard place to recruit for. Sure. So it wasn't a black and white across the board. So we had to really find, what the nuances were for each specific geography, and then from there, what's the hottest fire, and is it a leadership issue? Do I have a people issue or do I have a process issue? And really figuring out what that looks like. And for the people issues, which kind of they stood out pretty easily for us, is really performancing them out. And getting those, and this is not just providers, but these are MAs, these are clinic managers, these are everybody that is involved in that process. And then getting ads out quickly and working very closely with our recruiting team and putting the pressure on them to get us some candidates so that we can start interviewing. We also found out too that in our recruiting process, we weren't really asking the right questions. Mm-hmm. And so I worked with our head recruiter on really just defining what is it that we want to ask our candidates and see what those responses were to help us really judge, who is the best candidate, and bringing them forward. So that was the first part of that. And then really, getting the folks in, then you can really build your team. It was really closing those gaps with schedule. So this was what would you say, Joni, almost a 3-month process to get to that point?
Yeah.
It was a slow go.
And we did utilize locum coverage during that time to fill those gaps and to narrow the number of closings. But we did, in the process of having, like Deniz said, more structured recruiting efforts, an interview process. We did that on the provider side with clinical scenarios to make sure that they were a good fit for the organization. And we ask organizational cultural questions too, yes. Because they might be a good fit clinically, but not culturally. So we're able to kind of delineate out who would do well in this environment and who wouldn't. And then we revised all of our onboarding. Our onboarding was really lacking, right? We didn't have a good onboarding process for providers or for staff. So we standardized all of that across the board and looked at what we needed to include in onboarding. And I think the biggest thing was frequent touch points with these new leaders to kind of make sure that it's implemented at the local level. So what that looks like is Deniz and I, we have an executive leadership meeting every Monday, right? It's Monday. They go over all new updates. They go over operations, clinical research, because we have research and we have a lot of different areas. And then we will take that and we meet the following day with all of our leaders across our entire region, every dyad structure, every dyad partnership. And we review that with them. They're able to ask questions. They're able to dig into it. Dennis and I take stuff back that needs to be revised or revamped. And then that information is taken down to the clinical teams, right? So they will disperse that information to the clinical team so that they're a part of that and they know the why behind it. Because I think that I've worked in medicine for a long time. And when I was at the clinic level, executives and that were up here. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what they do. They know what we do because we communicate. So they're aware of why we're changing things, how it impacts our bottom line, and, how we can achieve profitability, how we can sustain the business of urgent care, and how we can grow. Like I said, we're adding primary care now, which is fantastic, and fellowships and different things that are going to be able to sustain that, the pipeline for our recruiting efforts, which has really been critical.
And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy too, right? Because if you have a well-run clinic and then you introduce new candidates into this clinic, it's going to showcase well. And, we want this place looking like an Ethan Allen showcase. I want someone to walk it in and say, this is great. This feels warm. This feels, you got trained MAs. You're greeted properly. The place smells great. Just all the scent, I want to appeal to all the senses for this. I mean, it's hard to do that if you're in a toxic environment.
Yeah,
it's hard to do that if you got
interviews too. We do in-person interviews, which has really helped, don't you think? A ton.
100%.
There's people that look good on paper that I talk to on the phone that I think are fantastic. I meet them in clinic and go over stuff, and I'm like, "There's no way we're hiring them."
So,
yeah. We understand that.
We could talk hiring process with you quite a bit and extensively.
Yeah,
we've gotten really good at it too, but we've done it in a very unique way. But it's not about us.
Yeah, we're quirky on our hiring. One of our pieces at toward the end, like they may be great culture, great skill, great everything, but if they have a spouse, we get to go to dinner with them and the spouse and make sure the spouse is on board. Because if they're not on board, then it doesn't matter how much they like us and we like them. It doesn't work out.
Every time they go home, if they have a spouse in there going, I can't believe you took that job or this, that, the other. I mean, they're going to bring that to work.
Yeah, they'll bring it.
So
100%.
That's wild. I love that.
So in understanding the journey for that, but really just empowering the teams, that they can do this and they have the ability to do this and being responsive. I think, that really is one of the most, it's one of the things that I enjoy the most about our team specifically is that Joni and I are very responsive. I mean, we're kind of hypocrites when we tell our folks to have boundaries with their time, but we want to sit at 9:30 or 11 o'clock at night, whatever, and we will respond and we will follow up and do whatever. And I think it just showcases to the person, hey, if it's important to you, it's important to me. And that really seats really well from a relationship standpoint. And then they see the follow-up and they see the results. And, in a lot of the clinics, we exist to help really provide a really great product in the EHR. And so the feedback from the field, it needs to get to our engineering team, so they can at least address it and do that. That has to happen in a short amount of time. So if there's delays in that, it just causes issues. And so making sure that there's no bottlenecks in that process from the clinical side or the operational side. And then you have the person that brought the issue up, seeing the results, in a broadcasted way. That makes people feel good. Like, okay, yeah, my voice is being heard. I'm being listened to, even though I'm just an MA, even though I'm just, whatever the case might be. Yeah, you're important and your opinion matters.
And Dennis, you brought up a good point too about I'm just an MA or I'm just a provider. What I like about the org as well is that we reward talent. It doesn't matter if you have a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, if you've done healthcare. We have some of our best clinic managers that started off as MAs. They know more about P&Ls now than I do because they learned it and they really, were able to kind of move up and be that leader in that clinic. And they're proud of that. So they're going to work harder for you too. So we believe in promoting from within and not just promoting, I don't think, qualified applicants, but applicants that have the drive, that have the personality, that have the intelligence, that they can do it. and maybe never have been given the chance. That's my best success, to see people succeed like that. Like, I love it.
Yeah. And I worked with our boss to initiate a quarterly bonus structure for all of our teams, which are tied to the KPIs. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. These CMs have the ability to earn over $10,000 a year in bonuses.
That's outstanding.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And and it's tethered to, supply cost and your EBITDA, your margins. So it makes the conversations a whole lot more aligned when you've got a financial incentive that's very, attainable to that. So that really helps, spark the right behaviors and whatnot, especially if you got folks that are hungry for it, bring them on,
Yeah, we have that on the provider side as well. So I think that's helped something. And they know, they look at the metrics, they know what they need to do.
Yeah.
So it makes it pretty
they want to look at the metrics.
easy. Yeah, they want to. Yeah, it's interesting.
If I could,
when our reports don't come out on time, we get an earful. Like, when is the financials coming out? We want to know.
Right.
How do we do? So that's good. That's a good problem.
If I could tie every position in my company to a performance metric, where you're on base or off pace or whatever, I'd do it. Not everybody's built that way, but they are built for bonuses. Everybody likes that cushion.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's attainable. Yeah, and you can celebrate it.
I'll tell you from my perspective, we were talking about, PAs and all that kind of stuff, but we believe personally, and just with all the urgent cares that we've worked with now over the years, the front desk person is the most important person in the clinic. And there's not really even a close second, in our opinion. And when you treat you, we can tell, because we get to listen to a lot of phone calls. We get to see the conversions just on the marketing side of things. The clinics that have a well-respected, well-paid, well-trained, and talented front desk person are thriving.
Yeah.
Thriving. And
I'll say something controversial about that, though.
Yeah, you would be the first one. You're good. Most people are trying to take them over to AI.
In our lower staffing locations, where it's a 3-man team or less, the front desk is also an MA.
Okay.
And so because the clinical acumen that's really required at that level, to be able to communicate, it's hard to find a front desk sometimes, especially in certain geographies where that really exists. And so you end up having a lot of back and forth from a communication with the patient, communication back to the clinical area, back and forth. And then you look at the spaghetti diagram and it's like, oh my God, they're wasting the treads on their shoes going back and forth.
Right.
Versus, having an MA that has that clinical acumen that can speak into the situation and provide that consult, that can provide that information to the patient a lot more efficiently. So in our territory, all of our lower staffing levels all have only MAs, and they kind of switch back and forth with front desk and MA operations, but they are all MAs.
Yeah.
Well, I don't find that controversial at all. I think it's brilliant, and that you're now leveling up that experience.
Yeah.
Well, it's helping with staffing. It's helping with when they would have to fill in. We did have just office assistants, right? They would man the front desk. But we're able to utilize MAs in different capacities. So it's kind of a win-win for us.
Yes. And
those we have 2-person teams. I work in a 2-person team clinic. You really have to have a good relationship with your MA. So we're able to help each other. If my MA is busy, I'm rooming a patient and bringing a patient back and getting everything set up.
100%.
So I'm dual trained too. I can do my own testing and all of that. So it is.
She can pick up the phone. She can schedule an appointment. Yeah. She can do it all.
Yeah. So I think that
combat multipliers is what we call them. People that can shoot, move, and communicate.
There you go.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but
CombatUrgentCare.com.
CombatUrgentCare.com.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Joni, hey, we got this.
I know. We should write.
You're welcome. Hey, I believe we might have just birthed a new business right here. No, I love that. And let's do a bit of a transition. Like I said, we're going long and it is what it is. And I want you to tee up AI, but I want to talk about it for just a second, and that we're using so much AI at the moment. Part of that is helping alleviate or even like remove the front desk need from the standpoint of answering phone calls and scheduling. It's all doing online schedulers, or now we have AIs that'll just do it over the phone and text you a link or whatever. But you were talking about it, and I'm very fascinated with this because we don't get to see it the way you do, because I'm not sitting there with the stethoscope around my neck. But you were talking about how y'all are using AI
charting
in the charting.
Yeah.
One, are you using your own proprietary AI, or are you using one that you like? And if so, which is it? And then 3, how are you implementing that to get your door-to-door down? That was my question.
Yeah, it's our own proprietary
okay.
AI that we developed. I think the good thing about that is that we have a product team that works with our AI charting. And so we get frequent updates, feature and product updates based on feedback from the staff, based on feedback from providers and the MAs in the clinic to make improvements. But the way it typically works is, and how it helps with door-to-door time is, when you have a patient come in, it starts from like when they're checked in, when the MA checks them in, and then the clock ticks. So we do efficiency metrics from the time of check-in, how long. Once we initiate AI, it should be under 10 minutes, 2 to 10 minutes in the room. Obviously, sometimes that falls, if you have a really complicated patient, but 10 minutes is a pretty long time. And then when you are able to check out with the patient and close that chart. So it goes into like several different phases for completion. But I typically would go in the room, you take a chart, or you take you have an iPad computer. All of our full-time providers get iPad. And you ask the patient, we have would you mind being recorded? And then you hit the recording and you have a conversation, just like we're having a conversation.
Yep.
I'm able to focus on that patient. It picks up what I'm saying and it picks up what they're saying. So typically I'll go over their history, looking at them. I'll talk to them. I can move around the room. I can do my exam and kind of talk out loud when I'm thinking about differential diagnoses and any findings that are positive that I found. And then I will talk about our plan of care, what we're going to do, if we're going to order tests and what that's going to look like. And then I'll hit summarize and go to the next patient. And by the time I'm out of the room, my note's already in. It's summarized in a way that captures everything that I said. It provides the differential, it provides a diagnosis for you. The caveat to that is sometimes you have to change it. Sometimes you have to change the diagnosis if it doesn't quite align with what you wanted to select, but it really reduces that time to chart. So basically I'm not spending any time charting. I come out of the room, I click my summarize, and I'm able to get the patient out of there. And it's really reduced our we have 2-person teams, which is rough, right? We have an MA and we have a provider, which I have. My average door-to-door time is 30 minutes.
Wow.
So it's really,
and we have providers, that are single providers using the AI charting without any scribes, anything like that, and they're able to see, upwards into the 50s, on provider visits. It's still a busy day, but it gives them more capacity. And Aaron Bali, our founder, the conviction behind him and creating this whole thing was not as much like for us as in the United States to have this, because we have a lot of, resources, but, for providers that live in Sudan or Ethiopia, where there's just a tremendous demand, but you've only got, 1 or 2 or 3 providers. This EHR has helped to increase their capacity to be able to see more patients. And so that's the spirit in which all of this was even founded on. And like I said, our clinics are really basically the quality control for the EHR to make it a better product, and really make it a sustainable product for the community.
Good info.
Yeah. And for me, I like most being able to see the patients. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to the doctor and they're on the computer the whole time, or.
And they're not even looking at you.
Yeah. So this is just, you kind of put that away. You're able to kind of face them. And so it does help with patient experience scores too.
100%.
All of our patient experience scores in Colorado are 100%. And patients really, really enjoy that, face-to-face interaction.
To me, it's almost like a weird view of AI has allowed the doctor to go back to 100 years ago, where it's all about the patient and the visit and not about all the documentation and the paperwork that has to follow it. Because now it's all automated. Now you have a live assistant with you all the time, and just takes away the busy work and lets the doctor be a doctor for a second.
That's right.
which makes all the
It's
difference in the world.
too, because you're not using scribes, or you're not using
so it's a headcount reduction.
You're not using like dictation devices or anything like that. This is all built into the actual EHR product. So
instead of hiring a scribe, you can hire another MA.
Yeah, right.
There you go. Well, guys, we've gone over time for sure, but it's been an amazing conversation. We knew it happened.
Yeah, this one was one I was like, I'm allowing it. Let's go.
It's totally fine. But we also recognize, like, our listeners, like, they like that 30, 40 minute type thing. So we want to not go on too long. What this is going to become is another episode. Like, what the guys come back and kind of deep dive some more. But this has been fantastic. Like, just at the end of the day, listening to this episode, like, for the clinics that are listening right now, leadership matters, people matter, and your processes. Like, it sounds intuitive, but some people just completely miss that mark. But you guys are proving the point right now. We know how to make all those items work, and now our clinics are doing what we want them to do, and everybody's actually excited. The culture's a lot better, like all the things that matter to help increase the profit and all those items.
No closed days.
There you go.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Well, give us some parting words of wisdom before we shut down. What would you like our audience to know about growth and what you're doing with this dyad leadership?
I would just say, investing in the relationship of the dyad partnership is probably will be your best ROI. And if you, the stronger you make that relationship, you will see a correlative relationship into the bottom line of your clinic with the cohesiveness of that relationship.
And I would say,
I love it. Joni?
I would just say lean into difficult conversations and lean into that uncomfortableness, because you need to have that to get to the other side. And it makes it so much more just wonderful when you get there. But you can't get there without having those type of conversations. It just doesn't happen organically. You really have to kind of like, you got to
lean into the heart.
Yeah.
100% of the best opportunities come outside of your comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Joni, Deniz, thank you. Appreciate you both coming on and visiting with us. We'll have you on again here in the near future.